Okay, so my guest here is Mr. Martin Armstrong. I got to know you through a historian in the Netherlands who introduced you as a programmer, and I hadn't heard of Martin Armstrong. He said, well, you should. You're an IT person. But if I look in Wikipedia and stuff, you're called an economic forecaster. If you're introduced, Martin, how would you describe your area of expertise?
Well, I guess mainly it's been I was a trader, so it's more from the economic side, I suppose. Actually, I was speaking at one of the market technicians in Chicago, and Milton Friedman came up to me, and I was pretty much the one of the top analysts in foreign exchange worldwide. So back when they were even forming the G5 in 1985, I was one of the people they called in for that. And it was Milton who basically told me, he said, look, what you're doing is something that he only dreamed about. And I was kind of really surprised. But then I realized he had written a book in 1953 about the floating exchange rate system. So because we did foreign exchange, we had basically offices around the world, from Geneva and London and Japan and China. I mean, everywhere. So because that was the major issue. So when I was younger, I also happened to have my father was a lawyer, and he was trying to push me into law. So I have a good background in law too, but I was more interested in trading. So he then pushed me into programming. So then I got into artificial intelligence, and that's how I created our system. We named Socrates.
Yeah, that's what Eric Macking said. You wrote the best software in the world, basically, with that program Socrates. We'll get to that, what that thing does in a moment. Now, my first question to you is, in this changed time over the last half year at the least, what Socrates does is analyze pretty much everything and find cyclical movements, and you use them or use that program to forecast future events. Now we're in a situation with the coronavirus. I was wondering, does this corona situation in itself follow a cycle that you have determined?
Disease, yes. Basically a cycle to just about everything. The real, I mean, this is not a real, serious event. They're using it politically. I mean, all you have to do is look at the death rate. It's no greater than even the flu. A serious issue is when you're really like looking at the Spanish flu or something like that, and you're, if 10, 15% of the population is actually dying, now you got a real serious issue. We don't see that even remotely coming up. I mean, the first real disease cycle kicks in around 2022. So, I mean, this one is not even as bad as the 2017 flu.
Huh. Okay, thanks. I've been reading your blogs, armstrongeconomics.com, and on there, at least once, but I think you do it more often than that, you say we have to crash and burn before we can reach something good again. Now, I was wondering, is that scenario, like we need to crash and burn before we can build again, has that changed by this virus and the measures taken? In other words, has Socrates made changes to its longer term prediction of the future based on events of the last half year?
No, actually, what they are doing is, they are deliberately trying to crash the economy to create this great new reset. And in doing so, you're not only wiping out small businesses and things of this nature. So economically, Socrates has been showing that we're in a contraction into 2022. But it has also been forecasting, and I've put out for the last probably 10 years even, that this particular cycle would be a commodity cycle in the agricultural side, and that it was showing that we would be in a period of going into shortages. Ironically, this is exactly what these people have created by all these lockdowns and things of this nature. There is shortages of food developing around the world. I mean, from China, Africa, I mean, there's been food riots down there. Even in the United States, there was, periods where we couldn't find a lot of different things. And now you have the EU moving in to ban like fertilizers and things of this nature, which will seriously reduce the output of agricultural crops around the world.
Yeah. So I'm in Europe. I'm in the Netherlands. Just this evening, my prime minister has had another of his press conferences warning us for curfews happening and restricting us from, I believe we're not even allowed to be outside as parents with our kid if that child is over 14. So there's measures outside of any reasonable correlation with preventing a virus. So this leads into a question. We see lockdowns everywhere and riots in Europe, and then the World Economic Forum has presented plans, and the IMF is mentioning a great reset now and mentioning we need a Bretton Woods too. I was wondering, have these signals had an impact on the flow of money? Because that's what Socrates is taking in. You're looking at the flow of big money over the world. Have been happening over the last months have an impact of the flow of big money throughout the world?
Yes, it's confirming more or less what the trend has been, and that a lot of it will, I think, also be accelerated depending upon the presidential election outcome here. But I mean, what is going on with these people is that this great reset, has been orchestrated, honestly. And, the center has been the World Economic Forum. And this is all quite astonishing, really. But, I mean, Klaus Schwab, you can look on YouTube, he's put out his 8 predictions for 2030. And it's a communistic world. This is what the academics tend to always want to create. And his number one thing is you will own nothing. All right, you'll rent everything. He wants to eliminate property, end fossil fuels. You won't eat meat anymore. Honestly, if I did what these people did, I'd be in prison for probably, multiple lifetimes. You have Bill Gates and everybody standing up, and what do they have investments in? Meat substitutes. He's put in, investments in everything that they're pitching. Shut down meat plants, do this, do that. It all benefits whatever they have. It's the greatest inside, trading scam, I think, in the history of human recorded time. I mean, it's unbelievable. I really think, look, I have worked with governments around the world for 40 years. I mean, I was one of the ones who was called in by China to help them become a capitalistic system. It was very, very interesting, meeting with central banks there. I probably have met with more central banks than anybody, I think, in the world, really. And because they all know we have this computer, and it's not my personal opinion, and it's monitoring everything in the world. Every market, every buy market, agriculture, capital flows, weather, diseases, even natural disasters are in there. I mean, all these things are what is really behind the business cycle. It's not any individual thing. And the same thing with these climate change people. I mean, it's really absurd. It's CO2. I mean, it's just look on the NASA website what percent of the atmosphere is CO2. It's 0.04%. That's it. All right. They act like the world is going to end because of this. And they don't do any analysis prior to 1850. And, there's plenty of data that comes from ice core samples. There's always been a cyclical atmosphere. And it's been, clearly shown that there's a 300-year cycle that the sun beats like your heart. It increases in magnitude and decreases. In history, we have the poles flip. On Earth, it tends to be, last one was about 41,000 years ago. But on the sun, they flip every 11 years. Of course, nobody lives there, so we don't really know what happens. But when we go into solar minimum, the correlations are very clear. I mean, what comes out of the sun then is an increase in gamma rays. And a lot of people believe that perhaps that's why earthquakes and volcanoes tend to correspond to when you're in solar minimum. Okay. That maybe the gamma rays penetrate the earth more. So there's so much more that we're just scratching the surface. And you can never reduce everything down to a single cause and effect. And I think that's what our number one problem is in Western society. It's a complex thing that's more like a rainforest. It's every species is interrelated to everything else. I mean, it's not just simply one thing.
And what we're doing tonight,
our computer is showing that.
What we are doing tonight is creating also a presidential election broadcast. But unlike all the other ones, we're not focusing on Biden or Trump. Like, we're focusing on the effect of all these things that you just mentioned also. And would it even matter if Biden or Trump were elected, and would they be able to change this? So if we go back to the economic side of things, well, obviously they won't be able to change the cycle of the sun. But the statements made by World Economic Forum, by IMF, the corona measures that we're in, do you feel those being tied into Trump or Biden be elected? In other words, would either candidate be able to change the course of the EMF or World Economic Forum, you think?
Now, what we really have at stake is that the ECB there in Europe lowered interest rates to negative in 2014. So here we are 6 years later, and they still have been unable to stimulate the economy or get inflation to 2%. Why? Because all the economic theories that they have are failing. And you have to look at it from this perspective. What have they've done is they basically have destroyed the European bond market. The same thing in Japan. This is why the U.S. Treasuries are basically the only real thing game in town. But the central bank is trapped. It cannot now raise interest rates without blowing up its own portfolio. The member states cannot continue to sell bonds. The ECB is the one that buys them up at negative rates. So the only way out of this is really what our computer has been forecasting, and we're going into a monetary crisis cycle. They will talking about moving into an electronic digital euro, banning Bitcoin, etc., which is logical because they're really trying to get all the cash, prevent people from hoarding money and push it into the banks because they're not interested in bailing out the banks anymore. So all this is basically designed what they will do. And if you look at what Schwab is saying, you will own nothing. All right. this is basically the agenda, is that what they will do is really default on the bonds. Now, I've been pushing that they should at least declare them to be perpetual bonds, where you get an interest, and I've said it should be basically made at 3% to pay out an interest, or I find the bonds are no longer redeemable per se, more or less like the British consols. Now, the other side of the coin is what Schwab is, and that is basically just default, period. And that's what he's really saying: you will own nothing. So they no longer have to issue debt, roll it all the time. So this is basically a bailout of everything. And that's what they're really talking about, a new Bretton Woods, etc. There is no way to fix the current system. They are, since World War II, all they have been doing is borrowing year after year after year with no intention of ever paying anything back. And you can go to our site and you'll see that if you just calculate the cumulative interest that they have paid, all right, you get the left wing say, the capitalists and the money. 70%, up to 70% of the debt, and even this is applied to Germany before they start lowering these rates, was not money that went to schools or roads. It went to interest. That was it. So this system has failed. And how do you get out of it? I'm trying to at least retain democracy, etc. These lockdowns are basically about destroying the economy. You've already wiped out about a third of small businesses. And just look at what what they just did in Britain. Lockdown, basically saying, well, he's not guaranteeing it will be lifted at any point in time. They're going to wipe out Christmas. He's now made it against the law for more than 2 people to go out. And you're giving everybody an 80% of what their salary was, because he's destroyed their jobs.
What they also
now,
said...
nobody in their right mind would do this.
Yeah. He said, you'll own nothing, but then the sentence continued, and they said, you'll own nothing and you'll be happier about it. Well, what came to mind for me was, well, if you continue these measures, well, whatever comes after will make everybody happier. So they're making us miserable. So their solution would be more... accepted, maybe. If I understand...
basically what they're trying to do is they wipe out everybody's jobs, etc. They think that then you'll be satisfied by simply giving you some money and you stay home and watch TV.
Yeah, exactly. Now, another thing that came up was the G20. G20 finance officials set November 13th meeting to finalize debt framework. So, is this entwined? Is this the plan World Economic Forum is also pitching? And in your opinion, will that be then make outstanding debt perpetual with zero interest rate, or would they go with your plan, at least normalize interest rates? What do you think? Are they up to November 13th?
I think they're probably going to follow Schwab. He's got a lot more pull, I would say. Just look at his board of directors. I mean, Christine Lagarde's on the board of the World Economic Forum. So Al Gore. I mean, he's got these people basically eating out of his hand. He talks to Christine Lagarde all the time. Now, I can tell you that nobody will, in the actual press, is willing to stick their neck out and investigate. But if you look at it, Bill Gates started selling his stock in December last year, ahead of the crash. World Economic Forum, they sold out everything. All right. And Schwab, I can say, told somebody, well, he didn't want to appear to be greedy. This has been organized. It's been an intentional attack on the world economy to change it. And this is not something that oh, gee, look at this. Well, let's figure out how we can make it better. And they intended to do this.
Okay.
And like I said, I've worked with politicians my whole life. And for years, I mean, I would say, if we don't do this, it's going to crash. All right. And they still do it. All right. Because a politician is different. I can't run for president and say, vote for me because I saved your job. You're going to look at me and like, well, how do I know I would have lost it? All right. Nobody can win an election that way. It's better you lose your job, and then I say, vote for me, I'll get the guy that did it. So they love crisis.
What you also said is back in the day you were called in to assess a new presidential candidates. I'm assuming that stopped before. Well, maybe you were also asked to assess Biden at a certain point. But if you were if you were to give an opinion on Donald Trump or Joe Biden, what would it be at this time?
Oh, Trump, absolutely. I mean, the major difference is this: is that, I mean, I know for a fact all the allegations about Biden and Ukraine and China, I know they're absolutely 100% correct because I know people on the opposite side. But forget the corruption side. The difference between a career politician and somebody like Trump is that Trump has to return to a private business. So he's never going to pass some sort of law that's so draconian that's going to affect himself. Whereas a career politician does not return to anything. They just get speaking fees and they live off of the government for free. So I've studied many different types of governments, and the best one was the Republic in Genoa. The Doge, or like president, rotated on an annual basis. And it was a member of all the richest families. But it might be 30 years by the time your family came back into power. But that kept things legitimate because nobody would, again, pass a law that they would be subjected to themselves the following year. Yeah. And it wasn't this class warfare stuff that we hear. And ever since Marx, it's all, us against them. They try to divide people. And I mean, you can look at what was really the truth was the unemployment of blacks was at the lowest historical ever in December. So this has been all orchestrated to crash the economy so they really can rebuild it. It's kind of like Nero, what they say, fiddling while Rome burns.
So that slogan...
This is basically what they're doing.
That slogan that they come up with, build back better, that wasn't a lie, that's their intention. Right?
Yes, I mean,
it's not better for me.
Schwab put out his fourth, industrial revolution. Nobody ever designed the other ones.
Yeah, exactly.
He thinks, oh, okay, fine, we can, create artificial intelligence will replace all these different things. Look, I have a computer that will replace basically every analyst. You could use it to even replace the legal system, even politicians.
So basically, what he's doing is fighting the cycles, then, or no?
Yes, I mean, look, it's you look at his promo piece and it's equality, inclusion. This is the same pitch that they used for the Russian Revolution. I mean, it's just nonsense. He wants to bring equality. Are you going to give up all your assets and take off your sashes and your medals and go walk on the streets with everybody else? Of course not. We are the great unwashed. We're too stupid to know what's good for us. So it takes these super intelligent beings like him, Gates, Soros, and others to be on top to make sure that we have a good life. This is their idea.
in one of your newsletters, your blog entries, people can follow them for free, which is great. Martin Armstrong, or ArmstrongEconomics.com. You said you talked about Bitcoin. You mentioned that a moment ago as well, and you said Bitcoin is not going to be allowed. And I thought, well, how are they going to stop it then? But then the other day, like last week, I tried to sell a little bit, and then what you get in the Netherlands, and it's European law, is that you're supposed to show where you got them. Well, that's new. You never had to show where you got your euros or your dollars, but now you have to show how you got your euros, and then the trading company is supposed to make sure that you're not whitewashing your money laundering your bitcoins. So that's the easy way to prevent people fleeing to Bitcoin, maybe. But at the same time, I hear reports that Iran is now trying to trade or own or use Bitcoin. Do you still see Bitcoin being not allowed as an international player, or how do you see that? Has that changed?
No, I mean, from the beginning, I warned people, look, they're just allowing it so they're following it to see how it works, and then they will replace it themselves. They are not going to allow competition. They don't allow anybody else to print, money. It's a monopoly. China has already outlawed Bitcoin. That's it. We have other services where our clients can get into Socrates, and simply because Socrates was forecasting Bitcoin, Europe said we were not allowed to take any money on any other service as long as we have Bitcoin. We had to move everything. We had to shut down our services in Europe and move them to the United States because of simply one. And we told them, we're only forecasting Bitcoin. We're not selling it. Didn't matter.
They're afraid of it, though, then, aren't they?
Yes, look, that gold, anything that they see as a place that money can seep out of the system. So the digital euro they want, it eliminates bank runs. You can't go to the bank and say, give me all my money out of the account. How are you going to get it out?
Digital.
You can't go down there with a flash drive and say, here, put it all on there. This is just the way it is.
I was thinking that that digital euro or digital dollar or central bank digital currency, that it was maybe another year or 2 years before it would be here. But given the speed with the way things are developing now, I wouldn't even be surprised if we'd see it in January. What's your take on when we will see that introduced?
No, our information is that they were looking to do it by January.
Okay. Final.
Extremely rapidly, and particularly if Bush wins, if Trump wins, then what will happen is they're going to move at lightning speed because they're going to afraid that capital is going to be leaving Europe and running to the United States. If Biden wins, then he's already stated that he'll rejoin the UN because he'll just join on with everything else that's going on in Europe. And he'll be extending lockdowns, etc., over here as well.
Okay. So, let's final question I have two questions. So what I also read on your site and on the newsletters that you send out is information about how to trade a vertical market. So whichever president wins tonight, that might trigger those vertical markets you were talking about, or wouldn't it?
Yes, I don't know if you're going to know who actually won tonight. There is indications that there are a lot more people out there for Trump than the polls claim. I think it's the same thing as Brexit. I think the polls are just being manipulated to try and convince people to vote for Biden. But you go out there. I voted this morning, and all you saw was people out there. When you left, they go, "Did you vote for Trump?" That was it. I didn't see anybody out there with Biden signs.
Yeah, well, the theory is they all did it by mail, but we'll have to see about how that evolves then. Okay, but
yes, that will be interesting because I think that mostly the people that voted are the ones that don't trust that type of system.
Yeah.
So I think they were probably more pro-Trump that voted actually today, and they were using the virus to scare, honestly, everybody into staying home and trying to blame Trump for everything. It's just crazy. But
okay,
but this is really what's going on.
My final question would be this: over the last couple of years, I was under the assumption that it would be a big bank, Monte dei Paschi in Italy, or even Deutsche Bank, who would go under, and then we'd be back in 2008 on steroids. Now, with all the money printing, and you've been talking about the repo market, that the interventions there, and I've seen money go, the new support packages in the European Union. No bank, this is just my feeling, no bank is going to be allowed to fail anymore. They'll just print whatever they need to be. So they need to perpetuate this system. Now, what we are going through now, what is unfolding now, is that new in the history of the world? Are there parallels?
Yes. I mean, even if you look at Rome, for example, Rome didn't have a national debt. So as far as a real major debt crisis, this is probably the first time in history for that. There have been private, debt crises over the centuries, but we're looking at this stage in the game at really the governments have gone too far. The system does not work, and that's what this Great Reset is really about. And that's why they've been able to sell it. It's like I said, I've worked with politicians for such a long time. Somebody like Johnson, what he's done in London, he's basically destroying the economy. A third of small businesses are gone. By the time he's done, he'll wipe out the rest. And so you have to ask, he knows what has happened. Why would he do this again? All right. He has no intention of worrying about running for election. I've been given, internal memos from Germany. They're already planning to postpone the elections there as well. We may not see elections again. And this is all built up into this crisis, et cetera. And it's really about government because they were going to fail.
But should Trump win big, like not contested, he would not go along with this. But would he be able to change these plans or put a stop to them, or is it going to play out anyway? What do you think?
I think it's going to play out anyway. I mean, all he can do is basically stand up and offer an alternative. You'll see a lot of capital just basically flee Europe in that case. And but their grand plan with this Great Reset is to overthrow Trump. Then they have the nuclear power of the United States, and Biden even said it in his in the debate. He would rejoin the UN and use that power to force China to comply. This is what they're really trying to do, and I think it's seriously wrong. And they're going to put a risk of international war, and the computer's showing probably by 2027. So you're not going to be able to force the rest of the world to comply with this new, Great Reset. it's absurd. It's just completely absurd. You can't get politicians in Parliament or Congress to ever agree 100%. So how are you going to get the entire world to agree to this great reset? I mean, it's just not plausible.
Well, yeah, that is the question that I have when I see my prime minister on television. So, why is he doing this and not being honest or taking the? Well, obviously, we're a very small country. What can he do? At least he could be honest, but he's not doing that.
Look, to me, they have clearly been bribing the top politicians in the major countries that they need to, and then the others are going, well, I don't know, they're doing it, so I guess we follow that as well. But I'm telling you, I've worked with politicians way too long. I've had enough of them, and they do not do anything proactive. They prefer crisis, so therefore there's no way they would be doing this, to prevent a disease. No, they're doing this because they've been paid. And the only question is, what have they been bribed in? Euros, dollars, British pounds, Bitcoin. What is it? What are they taking?
This is we're going to ask them. There's going to be a point in time where we are going to ask them that. So that's my hope for the future. Martin Armstrong, just my last question then. Have you voted already or no?
Yes, I did. I was down there first 7 o'clock in the morning.
So would you tell us what you voted for? Who you voted for?
I voted for Trump because again, I don't think this election is traditional in the sense of one personality versus another. It's an agenda. And that's what I'm looking at. I don't care how many tweets Trump does. I mean, at least I know that he's not going to do something drastic because he has the business he has to return to.
It's true. Martin Armstrong, thank you so much for talking to us. Stay in good health.
Well, thank you for inviting me and good luck over there.
Okay, bye-bye.